The sun sank like molten gold behind the jagged peaks of the Sierra Madre, casting the small frontier town of Red Rock in a haze of amber and shadows. A lone horse clattered down Main Street, the hooves echoing like a warning drum. Every eye turned, but none lingered on the rider. They were waiting, some with curiosity, most with fear. They said no man survived meeting her. Evelyn Marlowe, 17 and impossibly graceful, leaned against the shuttered window of her father's boarding house. Her dark eyes glimmered in the fading light, framed by hair the color of chestnuts. In autumn, rumors whispered through Red Rock like wildfire. She was a siren in petticoats, beauty sharp enough to slice a man's courage clean through. Yet tonight, her gaze fixed on the stranger outside with something almost human in its interest. Maybe even hope. The Apache warrior's presence was impossible to ignore. Broad-shouldered, bare-chested, his skin glowed in the sun's last flare, every muscle tense as though ready to spring. Long black hair braided with small beads and eagle feathers fell past his shoulders. His dark eyes were steady, unblinking, and full of secrets Evelyn could not name. "Name's Taiwa," he said, tipping the wide-brimmed hat in a gesture of courtesy that unsettled the townfolk more than his silence. "I need shelter for the night," the crowd murmured behind him. Evelyn's father, stern and weary from years of frontier law, frowned. "No rooms left. You'll have to move on." Evelyn's lips pressed together, a quiet defiance in her stance. She had seen too many travelers vanish on this street, swallowed by desert heat thugs or worse. But something about this man whispered survival, whispered safety. And tonight, against every warning her family had given, she stepped forward. "I have a room," she said, voice soft but unwavering. "You can share it with me." Gasps echoed across the wooden sidewalk. Red Rock had never seen a girl make a declaration like that. Taiwa's eyes met hers, unflinching, and for the first time, the stories about him seemed to matter little. Room was modest, 2 cots, a small fireplace with smoke curling toward the ceiling, and a window that framed the Red Rock Canyon beyond. Evelyn moved to light a lantern, the wax flame trembling as though afraid to break the silence. Taiwa sat on the edge of one cot, boots dusty, fingers tracing the beads in his hair absent-mindedly. "I don't mean to frighten you," he said, quietly, almost apologetically, "but I am not like other men who pass through this town." Evelyn swallowed, noticing the tension in his jaw, the rigid way he held himself. Danger clung to him like a second skin. And yet, in the same heartbeat, there was a trust forming, a fragile, improbable trust that neither had expected. Outside, the wind whistled across the canyons, carrying with it the scent of sagebrush and gunpowder from distant skirmishes. Evelyn's pulse thrummed with a mixture of fear and curiosity. What had brought this Apache warrior to Red Rock? Why risk sharing a room in a town that believed she could end a man's life with a single glance? And most importantly, could she trust him? The lantern flickered, casting shadows across their faces. Taiwa's eyes seemed to hold centuries of stories, pain, and honor wrapped into a single gaze. Evelyn felt the room shrink around them, time pressing in. The frontier outside was dangerous, unpredictable. But tonight, inside this quiet room, something else had arrived, a chance neither expected. A fragile alliance in a world that believed only ruin awaited anyone who dared approach Evelyn Marlowe. And so the night began. 2 strangers, fate entangled. In the amber light, each aware that by morning, everything could change forever. The fire had burned low when Evelyn finally dared to glance at Taiwa. The Apache warrior sat cross-legged on his cot, the flickering lantern casting long shadows across his sharp features. The room smelled of cedar smoke and dust, a scent that seemed to cling to him as if the desert itself had followed him inside. She felt a shiver not from fear, but from some strange, magnetic tension that drew her gaze to him. "I didn't mean to startle anyone," Taiwa said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Not even you." Evelyn bit her lip. "No one in Red Rock has ever been polite to a stranger like you. They expect danger. Or death. But you're different." Taiwa's eyes softened, just slightly, enough that Evelyn caught a glimpse of something human beneath the warrior's exterior. "Different doesn't mean safe," he replied. His fingers absently traced the edges of the beads in his hair, a nervous habit she hadn't noticed before. Outside, the wind howled through the canyon, rattling shutters and carrying the distant cry of a coyote. Evelyn pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, trying to steady her racing thoughts. Sharing a room with him had seemed reckless at first, but now, in the quiet of the night, it felt inevitable, like fate had dragged them together despite the town's whispered warnings. She stepped closer to the window and peeked at the empty street. The shadows of the wooden buildings stretched long, dark fingers across the dusty road. "Why did you come to Red Rock?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but a tremor ran beneath it. Taiwa looked toward the window, then back at her. "I have a debt to settle," he said. "Not with the town. With someone from long ago. Someone who taught me that honor matters more than life itself." His gaze dropped for a moment, revealing a pain that made Evelyn's chest ache. She hesitated, then moved to the small table, picking up the lantern. "And if they don't forgive you?" He smiled faintly, almost bitterly. "Then I'll keep trying, even if it kills me." The honesty in his words was raw and frightening. Evelyn's heart thumped. Here was a man who carried the desert in his bones, danger in every motion, yet somehow, against all reason, he had placed himself in her room, in her life, if only for a night. The silence stretched, broken only by the crackle of the dying fire. Evelyn couldn't stop her curiosity. "Your tribe," she asked cautiously, "do they know where you are?" Taiwa's expression darkened. Some do. Others would rather hunt me down than let me return." He stood suddenly, moving to the window and resting his hand on the wooden frame. "Red Rock may be small, but it is safe. For now. Tomorrow the desert may call me back." Evelyn stepped closer. The warmth from the lantern brushed her cheek as she dared to study him more closely. Every line of muscle, every shadowed contour of his face spoke of survival, of battles fought silently and fiercely. Yet his eyes, deep and unwavering, held a story she wanted to know. "I don't know if I can ever understand you," she said softly, "but tonight I want to try." Taiwa's lips curved in a fleeting, almost imperceptible smile. "Try. Yes, but the desert is unforgiving. Trust comes slowly. Or not at all." Thunder rolled in the distance, a storm brewing beyond the canyon walls. Lightning briefly illuminated the small room, painting both their faces in stark white and deep shadow. Evelyn flinched, her pulse quickening. Taiwa noticed and reached out, his large hand brushing against hers, not a touch of possession, but one of reassurance. For the first time that night, she felt a fragile connection form, a thread of trust weaving between the fiery, untamed warrior and the young woman who had dared to invite him into her life. The wind outside picked up, carrying sand and whispers from the desert, reminders of the danger that waited beyond their fragile haven. Yet inside that small room, lit by a trembling lantern and shadowed by uncertainty, Evelyn and Taiwa shared the unspoken truth. They were no longer just strangers. They were allies in survival, two souls balancing between fear and desire on the cusp of a story neither could yet imagine. And as the storm's first raindrops tapped against the window, Evelyn knew that by morning, nothing in Red Rock or her heart would remain the same. Dawn broke over Red Rock with a crimson sky that burned like fire across the jagged cliffs. Evelyn awoke to the soft creak of the boarding house door. The room was quiet, but her heart thudded with anticipation. Taiwa had risen before her, already, preparing his horse outside, the early light glinting off the beads and feathers braided in his long black hair. "You can't stay here forever," he said, voice low and urgent. "The town believes in superstition. Some fear you, some fear me. Either way, danger follows us both." Evelyn dressed quickly, a stubborn spark igniting in her chest. "I'm not afraid," she said, though even she felt the tremor in her voice. "If danger comes, I face it, with you." Taiwa's dark eyes softened, but the tension in his jaw remained. "You've never faced a desert storm like the one brewing," he warned. "Rattlers, bandits. Even the land itself can turn against you." They rode out together, the canyon walls casting long shadows over the dusty trail. The wind carried the scent of sagebrush and iron-rich soil. Evelyn's fingers brushed against the coarse leather of Taiwa's saddle, a fleeting contact that sent warmth through her veins. Every muscle in his body flexed with readiness, a predator and protector in one. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the occasional call of a hawk overhead or the soft shuffle of hooves over sand and stone. Suddenly, a sharp cry shattered the stillness. Evelyn instinctively pulled her horse aside as Taiwa raised a hand, eyes scanning the ridge above. Two men emerged from behind a rock outcrop, pistols drawn, their faces twisted in greed and malice. "Bandits." "Stay close," Taiwa murmured, sliding from his saddle with the grace of a panther. He moved swiftly, boots crunching over the rocks, every motion precise, controlled. Evelyn followed, heart hammering, feeling both fear and a strange thrill. One of the bandits leveled his gun, aiming directly at her. Time slowed. Taiwa's voice cut through the air like steel. "Move!" In a blur of motion, he pushed Evelyn behind a boulder, his massive frame shielding her. Bullets struck rock and sand around them. The desert echoed with the sharp report of guns, the smell of gunpowder mixing with dust and sage. Taiwa's movements were poetry in violence. Muscles coiled and uncoiled with astonishing precision, his bare chest gleaming under the sun as he disarmed one bandit and sent the other sprawling into the sand. Evelyn's eyes widened not just in fear, but in awe. This was the man she had trusted, the one whose presence defied every warning of red rock. When the dust settled, both attackers lay groaning, disarmed but alive. Taiwa turned to her, his chest heaving, sweat mingling with the grime of the desert. "Are you unharmed?" "Yes," Evelyn stammered, trying to steady her racing heart. Her pulse throbbed in her ears, and yet, beneath the adrenaline, a spark of something else flickered: gratitude, admiration, maybe even something deeper. He nodded once, his expression unreadable, then mounted his horse. "The desert is unforgiving," he said quietly, "but so are we." They continued along the trail, the tension of the encounter lingering in the air. Evelyn glanced at him, noticing the subtle movements, the way his fingers still twitched near his weapons, the watchful glint. In his eyes, the ever-present aura of danger and strength. She felt both protected and inspired. Aware that the storm outside was nothing compared to the storms he carried inside. By mid-afternoon, they reached a narrow canyon where a stream trickled through jagged rocks. Taiwa dismounted and offered his hand to help her down. "Rest here," he said. "We'll need our strength for the night ahead." Evelyn looked into his eyes and for a fleeting moment saw the man behind the warrior, the one who had shared a room with her, who had trusted her, who had let her touch the edge of his world without fear. She smiled faintly, the first genuine smile of the day. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the canyon in blood orange and violet, Evelyn realized something terrifying and exhilarating. She was no longer just a girl from Red Rock. She was a partner in survival. Bound to a man who had defied legends, a man the desert itself seemed to respect and fear, and deep in the canyon shadows, unseen threats lingered, waiting for the night to fall. But for now, Evelyn and Taiwa had each other, and for two souls caught between danger and desire, that was enough. Nightfall draped the canyon in shadows, the air thick with the scent of sagebrush and distant pine smoke. Evelyn wrapped her shawl tightly around her shoulders, shivering from more than the cold. She had followed Taiwa through the narrow desert trails, trusting him to guide her past dangers that lurked like whispers in the dark. Every step was weighted with tension. Every rustle of sand or snapping twig made her heart jump. Taiwa moved ahead with the precision of a predator, barefoot now to better sense the terrain, his bare chest glistening faintly in the moonlight, the beads and feathers in his long black hair caught the silver glow, creating an almost ethereal aura. Evelyn felt both awe and a strange thrill. He was danger and safety combined, a man who could kill or protect with equal intensity. "This way," he whispered, pausing by a jagged rock formation. He knelt, inspecting a shallow indentation in the earth. The canyon holds more than shadows. Bandits, deserters, even treasure hunters. Some secrets are better left buried. Evelyn leaned closer, curiosity overcoming fear. What secret do we seek? Taiwa's gaze met hers, steady and unwavering. "Not mine to tell," he said, "but it is tied to the land and to you, whether you know it or not." As they crept deeper into the canyon, a soft glimmer caught Evelyn's eye. Moonlight reflected off something half buried in the sand, a weathered, iron-bound chest, small but sturdy. She knelt, brushing away dust and grit, heart hammering. Could this be it? She murmured "Taew" crouched beside her, his hand brushing hers for a fleeting moment, a spark of warmth that made her pulse race. "Perhaps," he said, "or perhaps a trap. Many have tried to claim what lies hidden here. Few have left unscathed." Suddenly, a low hiss echoed from the shadows. Evelyn froze, recognizing the warning in the sound. A rattlesnake coiled in the rocks, ready to strike. Taiwa moved with lightning speed, bare hands gripping a rock to flick it toward the serpent, diverting it from Evelyn. The creature slithered away, rattling its tail, and she exhaled in relief. "Every step here requires caution," he murmured, voice low, almost reverent. "The desert doesn't forgive mistakes, but neither do those who covet what lies hidden." Evelyn felt the weight of his words as she carefully opened the chest. Inside were yellowed maps, faded letters, and a small leather pouch filled with silver coins. Her fingers trembled as she lifted one of the maps, tracing the jagged lines of canyons and valleys. These are old maps," she whispered. "They could guide someone to fortune or ruin." Taiwa nodded. "Exactly. And some of those who follow the maps never return. That is why it has remained hidden until now." As they studied the chest, a distant rumble shook the canyon walls. Dust fell from the jagged cliffs above. Evelyn's gaze darted to Taiwa, who already had one hand on the hilt of his knife, the other brushing a strand of hair from his face. "Storm coming," he said quietly. "We need shelter now." He led her to a narrow crevice in the canyon, a natural alcove deep enough to provide refuge. Evelyn settled against the warm stone as Taiwa arranged the chest and their few belongings. Nearby, the wind howled through the canyon like a living thing, carrying whispers of the desert danger, promise, and secrets buried long ago. "Why do you trust me?" she asked softly, voice almost lost in the storm's rising fury. Taiwa looked at her, the fire of determination in his dark eyes undimmed by fatigue or weather. "Because you do not fear what must be faced," he said, "and because sometimes even the desert can sense when two souls are meant to survive together. Evelyn's chest tightened. For the first time, the fear that had haunted her in Red Rock seemed distant, replaced by something stronger, a connection, raw and undeniable, to this man who moved through the world like a force of nature. The storm outside battered the canyon, lightning cutting across the sky, thunder shaking the walls, but inside the alcove, Evelyn and Taiwa sat side by side, bound not only by circumstance but by a fragile, growing trust. The desert was dangerous, unpredictable, and beautiful in its raw cruelty, and together they were beginning to understand that survival was more than endurance. It was alliance, instinct, and perhaps something far deeper. And somewhere, in the shadows of the canyon, secrets waited to test them both. The first light of dawn spilled over the canyon walls, painting the rugged cliffs in shades of gold and crimson. Evelyn shivered in her shawl, the cold lingering from the night's storm. She had barely slept, the wind still whispering through the canyon like ghostly voices, carrying the scent of wet sand and sage. Taiwa had risen before her, as always, surveying the terrain with a sharp, practiced gaze. His bare chest glistened in the morning light, droplets of rain clinging to the contours of his muscles. Beads and feathers in his long black hair swayed with each precise movement. Evelyn had come to rely on his intuition, though the thought of trusting him so completely both thrilled and terrified her. "Stay close," he murmured as they moved along a narrow ledge overlooking a dry wash. "There are others here, men who will kill for what we found." Evelyn's heart skipped. "Bandits?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the breeze. "Worse," Taiwa replied. "Treasure hunters and killers who know the desert better than we do. They've been tracking us since yesterday." Their eyes scanned the rocky outcrops. Shadows moved among the stones, silent, calculated. Evelyn's pulse quickened, but Taiwa's presence was like a shield. His muscles tensed as he signaled her to duck behind the boulder. The ambush came swiftly. 3 men emerged from behind jagged rocks, rifles raised, eyes cold and greedy. Taiwa dropped to one knee, his bare chest gleaming under the rising sun, and grabbed a small knife from his belt. Evelyn, heart hammering, fumbled with her own revolver, feeling both fear and an unexplainable exhilaration. "Move!" Taiwa barked, pushing her behind him. His movements were fluid, lethal, each strike precise. He disarmed one man, sent another tumbling into the sand, and grabbed the third in a bone-crushing hold that left him gasping. The desert echoed with the sounds of struggle, the snap of leather, the grunt of men, the scrape of boots on rock. Evelyn's gaze followed every motion, both terrified and awed. Here was the man who had shared a room with her, the one rumored to defy death, moving with a grace and strength that left her breathless. She had seen courage before, but not like this. Not raw, untamed, undeniable courage. When the fight ended, the attackers lay disarmed, groaning in the sand. Taiwa straightened, his muscles glistening with sweat and dust, eyes scanning the canyon for any further threats. "Are you unharmed?" he asked, voice calm but edged with concern. "Yes," Evelyn breathed, lowering her revolver. "Thanks." "To you." He nodded once, then reached out to help her up, their hands brushing in a spark of warmth that made her pulse race. "The desert is unforgiving," he said softly, "but so are we. Together." For a moment, the canyon was silent except for the whisper of wind through the rocks. Evelyn looked at him, seeing not just the warrior, but the man, the protector, the enigma, the one who had entered her life like a storm and refused to leave. They continued along the trail, weary but determined, the chest of maps and coins strapped securely to Taiwa's back. Evelyn walked beside him, the thrill of danger still coursing through her veins. Each step reminded her that survival was no longer just about evading the desert or the greedy men who hunted them. It was about trust, alliance, and a bond forged in the crucible of fear and courage. By midday, they reached a narrow pass where the canyon walls towered above them, red and jagged, shadows pooling like ink at their feet. Evelyn paused, brushing dust from her sleeves, and glanced at Taiwa. "Do you ever rest?" she asked, half in awe, half in disbelief. He allowed a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Rest is a luxury the desert rarely allows," he said. "But I rest when I know those I protect are safe. You," his gaze softened as he looked at her, "you make me want to rest." Evelyn felt her chest tighten, a warmth spreading through her despite the desert heat. Words failed her, but she didn't need them. The connection between them was unspoken, forged through nights of danger, shared secrets, and a growing trust that neither could deny. As the sun reached its zenith, casting harsh light across the canyon, Evelyn realized that the desert had changed her. She was no longer the girl from Red Rock, cautious and fearful. She was a partner in survival, a witness to courage, and perhaps a companion to a man who defied legend itself. And somewhere ahead, in the shadows of the canyon, more challenges awaited. But Evelyn knew, for the first time, that she would face them not alone, but with Taiwa by her side. The sun hung low over the jagged canyon cliffs, casting long shadows across the dusty trail. Evelyn tightened her grip on the strap of her bag, her heart still racing from the ambush earlier in the day. Every step through the desert felt weighted with anticipation, each gust of wind, each distant cry of a hawk reminding her that danger was never far. Taiwa moved ahead with the grace of a predator, his bare chest glistening faintly under the fading light. Beads and feathers braided into his long black hair shifted with his movements. Every sinew of his body radiated alertness. He was a man in tune with the desert, with the land, and with the invisible threats that stalked them. Evelyn followed closely, awed by his silent vigilance. "This way," he said, pausing at a narrow fissure in the canyon wall. The shadowed passage beyond seemed to swallow the last light of the day. "Few know of this route. It will take us closer to safety, but it is not without risk." Evelyn swallowed. "I trust you," she said, though her voice wavered slightly. The canyon walls seemed alive, whispering secrets of travelers lost and fortunes stolen. They entered the passage cautiously. Rocks jutted sharply from the walls, and the trail twisted unpredictably, forcing Evelyn to watch her step. Taiwa's presence beside her was both reassuring and electrifying, the slightest touch his hand brushing hers as he guided her through. A narrow gap sent warmth through her veins, a silent acknowledgement of the bond forming between them. Suddenly, the sound of hooves echoed from deeper in the canyon. Evelyn froze, heart hammering. Taiwa's eyes narrowed. "They've found us," he whispered. "Stay close and follow my lead." 3 men emerged from the shadows well armed, their eyes gleaming with greed and malice. Taiwa's muscles tensed, and he shifted to stand between Evelyn and the threat, bare chest gleaming in the fading sunlight. He moved with lightning speed, using the narrow walls to his advantage, disarming one man with a precise strike and sending another tumbling into the rocky wall. Evelyn's pulse raced, but she no longer felt helpless. She had seen his skill and courage, and it emboldened her. When the last man lunged toward her, Taiwa caught him with a sweep of his arm, twisting the attacker to the ground with brutal precision. Evelyn's eyes widened, awe and fear mingling as she watched the warrior defy danger with an almost supernatural grace. "Are you unharmed?" he asked, voice low but steady, eyes dark and intense. "Yes," she breathed, lowering her revolver, though her hand still trembled. "Thanks to you." Taiwa's gaze softened, and for a fleeting moment, the fierce warrior she had come to know revealed a human vulnerability. "The desert tests those who walk it," he said quietly. It takes nothing lightly, except those who understand it, those who respect it. They pressed on through the narrow passage, the canyon walls closing around them, shielding them from the prying eyes of anyone who might follow. Evelyn noticed the way Taiwa's hand occasionally brushed hers, almost unconsciously, and she felt a warmth that had little to do with the desert sun. There was trust forming here, fragile but undeniable, a bond forged through danger, shared. Secrets and reliance on each other's courage. At last, the passage opened onto a hidden plateau, a small oasis carved from the canyon rocks. A trickling stream, shaded by a cluster of mesquite trees, offered water and relief. Evelyn knelt beside the stream, cupping cool water in her hands. Feeling the tension in her body ease slightly, Taiwo watched her with a quiet intensity, muscles relaxed but ready. "We are not yet safe," he said, "but this will give us time to plan, to rest." Evelyn looked at him, her chest tightening. The warrior who had once been a stranger, whose presence alone had stirred fear and fascination, now felt like an anchor in the unpredictable desert. She met his gaze, the sun glinting off the beads in his hair, and saw in him not just a protector, but a man whose courage and strength had become inseparable from her own dog as the sun dipped below the canyon walls, painting the sky in streaks of crimson and gold. Evelyn realized that the desert had changed everything. She was no longer the cautious girl from Red Rock. She was a survivor, a companion, and perhaps something more. And with Taiwo by her side, every shadow, every threat, and every secret of the canyon seemed conquerable. The sun was sinking behind the jagged canyon cliffs, turning the sky into a blaze of crimson and gold. Evelyn perched on a flat boulder, watching the trickling stream in the hidden plateau. Her fingers toyed with a small silver coin from the chest they had carried all this way. Each step of their journey had left its mark dust in her hair, bruises on her arms, and an exhaustion that clung to her like a second skin. Yet beneath it all, a spark of exhilaration burned brighter than the desert sun. Taewa stood a few paces away, bare-chested, the beads and feathers braided into his long black hair catching the last light. Muscles flexed as he stretched, scanning the canyon walls for any movement, his tribal jewelry glinting like sparks in the dying sunlight. Evelyn's gaze lingered on him, her chest tightening. She had seen him fight, protect, and survive against impossible odds. Yet here, in the quiet aftermath, he seemed almost human, vulnerable but still magnificent. "I can't believe we made it," Evelyn whispered, more to herself than to him. Taiwa's eyes softened, the warrior's edge giving way to something deeper. "We made it because we trusted each other," he said, voice low, steady, like the steady heartbeat of the desert itself. "Because neither of us runs from what we fear." Evelyn's lips parted, a mix of awe and something else, something warmer rising in her chest. "I never thought I'd see the desert survive me," she admitted, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "Or that I'd survive it with someone like you." He stepped closer, each movement deliberate, his gaze never leaving hers. "You've proven stronger than anyone in Red Rock ever imagined," he said. "Stronger than I even imagined. You faced fear, danger, and yet you remained yourself." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of sagebrush and the earthy richness of the canyon. Evelyn's heart pounded as he reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. The simple gesture carried a weight far heavier than any danger they had faced. The desert storms, the ambushes, the bandits, they all faded behind the intensity of this moment. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, feeling the warmth of his hand linger against her cheek. "You don't need to," he replied, stepping closer, bare chest almost touching hers. "Sometimes words fail, when trust and courage speak louder." They stood there, the hidden oasis a quiet sanctuary around them, sunlight fading into twilight. Evelyn could feel the bond between them, forged in the crucible of survival and danger. She realized then that the desert had not just tested her, it had revealed what she truly desired: courage, companionship, and a connection that neither time nor peril could sever. A sudden rustle in the nearby bushes made them both tense, but Taiwa's hand gently held hers, grounding her. The sound was only a desert fox, curious and harmless, yet the moment reminded Evelyn of how far they had come together through storms. Ambushes and secrets buried in the canyon walls dot as the sky deepened into shades of violet and indigo. Evelyn and Taiwa sat side by side on the boulder, the last light reflecting off the stream. For the first time, the fear and tension of Red Rock, the desert, and their journey felt distant. What remained was the trust, the respect, and the unspoken bond they had formed, two souls who had faced the unforgiving desert and emerged not just alive, but connected in ways words could not capture. Evelyn leaned slightly toward him, the warmth of his presence comforting, grounding her. Taiwa's eyes held hers, and she saw in them not just a warrior, but a protector, a confidant, a man who had shared his strength and vulnerability in equal measure. The desert was vast, wild, and unforgiving. But in that hidden oasis, Evelyn and Taiwa discovered something even rarer than survival: a sanctuary of trust, courage, and an undeniable bond that would endure beyond the canyon walls, beyond the storms, and beyond the dangers that had brought them together. And as the first stars began to sparkle above the canyon, Evelyn realized she had found more than safety. She had found someone who could face the desert with her, and perhaps someone with whom she could face anything.